Hi everyone, this is Amy from the Helms Academy, and today we're going to be talking about speaking versus writing and using your two voices. So when we talk about speaking and writing, they're obviously different in a lot of ways. Speaking tends to be more informal, whereas writing is more formal. In speaking, we can use loose grammatical structures, but in writing, we need to be careful about our grammar to be clear. And likewise, speaking, we always have the opportunity to add something, to clarify, but in writing, it needs to be communicated clearly as it's written the first time, since you won't have that live opportunity to make changes like you would when you're speaking. So when we think about these voices, every person has a voice that they use when they're speaking and another voice, as we call it, when you're writing. And particularly when you are writing for something like the HiSET, GED, or TASC test, or for an academic course of some type, or even in a professional email. There's a different way to do that than how you normally speak day to day. So today we're going to talk about some ways that you can identify that and how we can translate from our speaking voice, which often comes more naturally to many of us, to our writing voice, which we'll need to be able to use and often use pretty quickly and easily on things like those tests. So when you're writing an essay, the big thing, again, is going to be translating. You can use your speaking voice to think about ideas and to come up with things, but you need to have some tools to be able to turn that into your writing voice and make it sound a bit more formal. So one way we're going to do that today is by picking out some words for writing. Now, these are not an exhaustive list of words for writing, but they are really good tools to get you started and to get you into that writing formal voice. So we're going to go through these 40 words and they're in different categories. Our first 5 here are about explanations. Instead of saying, do you know what I mean? You could say in order to, or in other words, or to put it another way, or that is to say, or to that end. All of those words are going to give a more formal feel to your writing. They're also going to help you to transition ideas more easily to give an explanation. When adding information, there are many options. We could say something like moreover or furthermore. What's more? Likewise, similarly. Another key thing to remember, and all of these will help you to add another point in different ways. We also have as well as, not only but also, coupled with, firstly, secondly, thirdly, and not to mention or to say nothing of. So here, all of these lists come from a wonderful website, theoxfordroyale.com, which you see at the bottom of the screen here if you'd like to check them out more thoroughly. Or I'd also encourage you to take some time to pause the video on each slide, get some ideas for a few of these words. Now, you won't be able to use all of these words in any one essay, but it's good to practice using a few of them when you are writing, so that way they're in your back pocket and ready to go when you are in a crunch and trying to write something that you really want to put that academic voice into. Our next slide is about contrast or disagreement. When you're expressing contrast or a difference in something, or you're disagreeing with a point, there are a number of good words you can use. However, on the other hand, having said that, by contrast or in comparison, then again, that said, and yet. And all of these are going to indicate to your reader that you're about to show a disagreement or kind of the opposite side of what you just talked about. Now, we also have words that can acknowledge your reservations about something, show maybe you're not sure about it, or you have some hesitations about it. So we could say, despite this, with this in mind, provided that, in view of or in light of, nonetheless, nevertheless, or notwithstanding. And all these, again, are going to help us to see multiple sides to a point and acknowledge the reservations there. Our next list is about giving examples in 2 ways. Instead of just saying for example, which of course works, we could use some other phrases to mix it up, like for instance, or to give an illustration. That's a great one to keep in your back pocket. The next one is signifying importance, and we could say significantly, notably, or importantly. And finally, if you are ending your essay or ending a point in your essay, you can use these words that summarize a point. So you could say in conclusion, above all, ultimately, in the end, or all things considered. And these will all help you to kind of wrap up the points you've already talked about. Now, for our next section, I want you to think about things that you should not write, things that you might use in your speaking voice, but that should not be included in your writing. Those words include things like, so, kind of, like, sort of, basically, actually, literally. You can kind of get the feel of these words. These are words that sound like something you might say, but we want to translate them when we are working with an academic document. Some others are, okay, yeah, well, anything that shows hesitation, like huh, ah. And we also want to avoid half-complete sentences. Often when we're talking, we'll skip the subject of the sentence and leave it off, or we'll shorten the verb, or we'll slur some words together, or we'll just give half the idea and kind of leave it hanging because we know the other person understands. In writing, you need to make sure you're being as clear as possible and giving the whole sentence. So let's go through a couple of examples. Maybe in real life you would say, like I told you before. But if you're writing, you might say instead, as previously written, and that would help, again, change it into that academic feel. You might also say, are you getting what I'm saying here? Does this make sense? What I mean is, and instead in writing, you could just say, to clarify. You also want to keep writing simple. Simple writing is going to be the clearest way to go. So we could simplify what we might say a lot of just down to a phrase, to clarify. For number 3, we might say, this guy I knew told me that. But in writing, we want to say who they are, and what they said. So for example, I'm giving something specific here. Dr. Jansen, an optometrist, once said, so that tells me who this person is, so they have a name, and it also gives me a credential for that person. Particularly if I'm saying something that's related to optometry, right? This person is an optometrist, so that it gives me a reason to trust what they say. That's really important in academic writing. For the 4th one, you might say, also, I want to add that, but here in writing, you might say instead of that, furthermore, one could consider, and that use of one is very popular in academic writing. For our last one here, you might say, that decision was totally ridiculous and stupid, and the whole thing makes no sense. Well, of course, that's something you might say to your friend, but if you disagree with something that you're writing about, you do not want to say it that way. Instead, you could say, I disagree with this decision because, and you'll want to give evidence for why. That's also very important in academic writing. Thank you so much for watching today, and I hope you learned something new about your speaking and writing voices. This is something that takes practice and time, and I'm sure that the more that you put into it, the more you'll get used to using those different muscles. You can check out more of our videos on this channel, and don't forget to subscribe so you get the latest updates. You can also check out the Helms Academy on Facebook and Instagram, and at our website at helmsacademy.org.